Hello everyone. Today we're going to be going over 19th century intellectual and scientific developments. Scientific ideas and methods enjoyed a huge popularity and prestige in the public mind after 1850, which was fueled by the realization that technology could improve the quality of life. This led to a new religion-like ideal called positivism. Stemming from positivism was the Bacterial Revolution and chemistry. Louis Pasteur developed the germ theory of disease, and pasteurization is where it's the idea that heating a beverage reduces the activity and negative effects of organisms in the drink, so basically bacteria. And this knowledge helped reduce food poisoning. Joseph Lister developed the antiseptic principle in performing surgeries, which led to less people dying of infection. It was actually not common knowledge that you should wash your hands before doing a surgery, and so diseases such as typhoid, typhus, cholera, and yellow fever would now be the rates of that disease spread would be brought down due to more more clean habits. So, needless to say, there was a significant reduction in the mortality rate. Moving on, we have Dmitry Mendeleev, who made the periodic table in 1869. In addition, we have Michael Faraday, who developed the principle of electromagnetism. His basic discoveries on electromagnetism in the 1830s and 1840s resulted in the first dynamo, which is a generator. And generators were applied to the development of electric motors, electric lights, and electric streetcars. Next, we have Auguste Comte, the father of sociology. For positivism, he believed that all intellectual activity progresses through predictable stages, and thus humans would soon discover the internal laws of human relations through study of sociology. He believed that social scientists could help regulate society for the benefit of most everyone. He also became a leader in the religion of science. Charles Darwin established the principle of natural selection, and as well as the theory of evolution, which basically states that all life had gradually evolved from a common ancestral origin in an unending struggle for survival. The impact on religion was that Darwin's theory refuted the literal interpretation of the Bible, which is the book of Genesis, and so it created some crises in the church. This was later developed on into social Darwinism by a man named Herbert Spencer, which basically applied Darwin's laws to society. He called it, basically the survival of the fittest, which is that natural laws dictated why certain people were successful and why others were not, and was later used by imperialists to justify the conquest of weaker peoples. Moving on, we have Sigmund Freud, who established Freudian psychology. He was considered one of the three giants of the 19th century thought, along with Darwin and Marx. In contrast to the rationalism of the Enlightenment, Freud believed that humans were largely rational creatures, and that the human subconscious, the id, was not subject to reason. Thus, people were not as control of themselves as many like to believe. He also believed that sexuality was a driving force in one's psychological makeup, and that repressed sexual desires would lead to psychological issues. He was also the founder of psychoanalysis, and believed that hysteria of his patients originated in unhappy early childhood experiences where they had repressed strong feelings. Moving on to new physics, we have Max Planck, who established quantum mechanics. And he believed that subatomic energy is emitted in uneven little spurts called quanta, and not in a steady stream as previously thought. The laws governing the universe now seemed unpredictable at the atomic level, and thus matter and energy might be different and might be different forms of the same thing. It shook the foundations of 19th century physics that viewed the atoms as stable, indestructible building blocks of matter. Moving on, we have Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, who discovered the first radioactive element, radium, in 1910. Moving on, we have Albert Einstein, who established the theory of relativity of time and space, which challenged the traditional ideas of Newtonian physics. He theorized that time and space are relative to the viewpoint of the observer, and only the speed of light is constant for all frames of reference in the universe. The theory united an apparently infinite universe with the incredibly small, fast-moving subatomic world. His famous equation, E equals mc squared, was that matter and energy are interchangeable. Even a particle of matter contains an enormous level of potential energy. Lastly, we have Ernest Rutherford, who split the atom in 1919, and he assumed that the structure of the atom was positively charged in the nucleus and had negatively charged electrons surrounding it. All in all, the impact of the new scientific theories on the European mind was clear. Darwinism further challenged the Bible's account of creation of humans. Freudian psychology undermined the belief that humans were rational beings. The new physics shattered the popular belief that the universe could be easily explained by Newtonian physics, and scientists realized that they knew less and less about the universe than previously thought. In continuation, we have realism, which is the belief that art and literature should depict life as it really was. Honoré de Balzac's Human Comedy depicts urban society as grasping, amoral, and brutal, which is characterized by a Darwinian struggle for wealth and power. Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary portrays the provincial middle class as petty, smug, and hypocritical. Émile Zola was a giant of realist literature and portrayed the semi-animalistic view of working-class life. We also have important English figures relating to realism. Charles Dickens' Hard Times portrays the grim life of workers in industrialized England. George Eliot examined ways in which people are shaped by their social classes as well as their own inner strivings, conflicts, and moral choices. And Tom Hardy's Tess of D'Urbervilles portrayed a woman who was ostracized for having premarital sex. Another figure is Leo Tolstoy, who was the greatest Russian realist of his time. He had a fatalistic view of history, but regarded love, trust, and everyday family ties as life's enduring values. Henrik Ibsen was the father of modern drama, and his plays examine the conditions of life and issues of morality, often at odds with Victorian views of the day. Some characteristics of realism in art was that artists created art simply for art's sake. Rather than depending on patrons to fund their works, examples being the church and nobles, artists exercised virtual artistic freedom and hoped to make their money by selling their paintings to the public. This was a stark contrast to the Renaissance or the Baroque periods, where artists were commissioned by elites who specified what they wanted the art to look like. France dominated the realist art movement, and the main goal of realists was to portray life as it really was and not an idealized account. Thus, ordinary people became the subject of numerous paintings within realist works. Some key figures were Gustave Courbet, and he coined the term realism. One of his famous paintings, The Stone Breakers, is a painting showing workers breaking stones. It was groundbreaking as the subject matter seemed extraordinarily trite. Additionally, we have Francois Mollet, which in his piece called The Gleaners, it depicts a farm woman gleaning the fields after the harvest. This is actually the picture that I have presented on the right side. Next up, we have Honoré Daumier, which in his piece called The Third Class Carriage, a grandmother is depicted with her daughter and infant on a railroad. And this is a good example of how the railroad impacted the lives of peasants, making it possible for them to move or travel long distances. Additionally, we have Edgar Degas, who, in The Laundry Girl's Ironing, depicts ordinary women performing unskilled labor. Additionally, we have Edouard Manet, who was a French realist and impressionist painter who bridged both movements. And he was also considered the first modernist painter. Next up, we have Impressionism. This developed in France, and its impact was that cameras could now accurately capture a subject, so artists moved away from trying to perfectly capture an image. Instead, they sought to capture the momentary overall feeling or impression of light falling on a real-life scene before their eyes. So, as a cause, they focused especially on landscapes and sought to dissolve form into color and light. Thus, paintings were completed very quickly, and brushstrokes were highly visible. One figure is Claude Monet, who was the foremost Impressionist painter. His impression Sunrise was considered the first Impressionist painting. He was also most well known for his series paintings of the countryside at Giverny. Another figure is Pierre-Auguste Renoir, who, in addition to landscape, painted subjects in candid poses. And additionally, we have Camille Pissarro, who was considered by some to be the true father of Impressionism. And lastly, we have Berthe Morisot, who was considered one of the greatest female artists of the late 19th century. For the characteristics of post-impressionism and early 20th century art, we have that it sought to know and depict other worlds other than the visible world of fact. It sought to portray unseen inner worlds of emotion and imagination. A great example of post-impressionist art was Vincent van Gogh, whose Starry Night was a painting of a vision of a night that he imagined, not as it really was. Moving on, we have Paul Gauguin, who pioneered expressionist techniques and saw form and design of a painting as important in themselves. He became famous for his paintings of the South Pacific, where he spent some time. Thirdly, we have Paul Cézanne, who particularly committed to form and ordered design. His later works became increasingly abstract and non-representational. Fourth, we have Henri Matisse, perhaps the most important French artist of the 20th century. The expressionism of a group of painters led by Matisse was so extreme that an exhibition of their works in Paris prompted shocked critics to call the Les Faves, which is the wild beasts. Pablo Picasso is the last artist on this list, and he was one of the most important artists of the 20th century. He founded Cubism. His Les Metamorphoses d'Avignon is considered the first Cubist masterpiece. Cubism concentrates on complex geometry of zigzagging lines and sharply angled overlapping planes. Lastly, we have Expressionism. Expressionism was created in 1910, and this basically focused on abstract and non-representational pieces. Wassily Kandinsky was a Russian painter who turned away from nature completely with his non-figural paintings. And Edvard Munch was another well-known expressionist artist. That concludes the 19th century intellectual and scientific developments. Thank you for watching.